Hello and welcome to this edition of the Halcyon Show. My name is Lon Wisely and I'm going to be your host for this episode. Joker movie. Talked about it yesterday, albeit just gave my impressions and thoughts having just seen it. It's time for them spoilers, bitches. So if you've not seen Joker and you don't want to know what happens, don't watch this video. You need to go watch this film, if nothing else. Then again, it's one of those films that will genuinely leave you thinking about it for some significant time afterwards. And obviously, I got my initial impressions out of the way in the first video, so I'll try not to duplicate those as best I can. So I'm going to talk about individual scenes that occur within the film and give you my thoughts on them. So the film opens up with the scene that's in the trailer where he's pulling his face across and he's putting on his makeup and he's crying in the... And it just sets the tone for the rest of the movie completely. Because the thing to take away from Arthur Fleck's character is that he is just unconnected to anybody or anything. There's nothing in the movie where he feels a genuine connection. Everything is just sort of off. A lot of other reviewers have touched on the fact there's a scene in the movie where he's watching a stand-up comedian and laughing at the offbeats. And that just, it goes some way to showing that he doesn't understand the humour. Having watched a few interviews with Joaquin Phoenix and seeing how he is just as a normal person, he's a very difficult person. Like a lot of people are leaning in to laugh and doing the normal social stigma things of saying, oh, we need to be friendly to each other, we need to have some friendly banter, and he just doesn't buy into any of it. And the one interview that I saw he actually was warm to someone was someone that was almost as disconnected from the interview as he was, because he was willing to sort of sit more comfortably, ease his shoulders, lean back, give answers that I'd heard him give a few other times, but he gave them in a warmer way and then had some friendly banter with the interviewer at the end. He connects with that character in a way that I think people didn't give him credit for in the initial instance. And the reason for that is because the Joker is in essence a child. Doesn't really understand the world and is primal and instinctive to a certain degree. The impotent rage that he builds up throughout the course of the film due to the interactions that he has with people that aren't reciprocated or he receives negative feedback on, despite the fact that that's the way he assumes he's supposed to react to things. So there's a scene in the movie where he meets the female lead in this film. I keep forgetting her name, unfortunately, but she plays the potential love interest, who turns out not to be a love interest at all. She's merely a figment of his imagination for much of the film. She meets him for real, but her interactions with him in the film are completely fictitious. He imagines it all. It's a way of his psyche trying to make the world seem more appealing. The point of that, though, is that his relationship with her is skewed to a certain degree because he doesn't understand how men and women are supposed to interact with each other because of his relationship with his mother. His mother is very strained with him, so she seems to, on the surface, have a very good relationship. But there are certain scenes in the movie where she'll throw comments at him that just kind of leave you flabbergasted, like, wow, that is so castrating to someone. I mean, the one that sticks out to me is that he thinks he's just had a date. And he hasn't. He's been on his own, unfortunately. You don't know this at the time. He comes back in, and he helps his mother out of her chair. So he's already doing something quite altruistic. He's helping his mother out, and they're both in good spirits to go to bed, because she's fallen asleep in the chair. And she goes, why do you smell of cologne? He said, because I had a hot date tonight. Or a big date tonight, I should say. And as she's leaving the room, she just kind of nonchalantly says, aren't you supposed to get laid then? Like, wow, okay. Earlier on in the film as well, like he said something like, "Oh, my stand-up career, and I'm going to do that as a job." And she goes, "Aren't you supposed to be funny if you're a stand-up? You're not very funny, Arthur." Like, wow. I mean, every scene in this film. The reason why it's so hard to watch, and I couldn't really allude to this in the review that I gave, my impressions video, I should say, is because every scene is twinged with this. You can see it all unfold, and you understand how it's all unfolding, and it makes you feel genuinely guilty, because I think that every single one of us has been in situations with someone who is just being awkward or is unable to process and deal with the situation they're in, and you want to guide them through it. You want to help them through it to a certain degree, but at the same time, the societal preservation kicks in. You go, well, I'll look foolish if I do this, and I'll look silly, or this guy creeps me out. I can't step outside myself to help him. We've all been in those situations, and it makes you think back, and it makes you think, wow, did I hurt that guy? Did I hurt that girl in some way, form, or fashion that I wasn't even cognizant of? Is it something that I do often? You know, this is this film shines a light on someone that feels downtrodden to a ridiculous degree. This is obviously an absolute worst case scenario, one would hope. But the same insecurities plague a lot of people, I think. And there's a scene in particular where he's come in, I think, right, so, it's the scene in the trailer where he gets hit, he gets beaten up by the kids. He comes back the next day, and he's called into the office of his boss. And his boss says, you've got to give the sign back. Now, as you see in the trailer, the sign's destroyed. He's been beaten with it. And he says, well, you know, I told you, I got beaten up and the sign was destroyed. So, well, no, the owner says you ran off with it and never came back. He needs to give the sign back. Why would I steal a sign? And the guy goes off on a rambling tangent. And there's just this moment where Arthur is just, he's distant. He's not in the room anymore. He's just staring at him, smiling, eerily, grinning at him as the music, the theme that I alluded to in my review, is playing in the background. This sort of almost reverse parallel version of the Dark Knight theme from the Dark Knight movies. Just a 2-note violin, and it's just dripping with a tragic tone. And he's just grinning and just losing the will as it seeps in, and the music fades up and the conversation fades down, so you can't hear so you're effectively in Arthur's mind just listening to him talk. The ending scene as well, I thought, I don't know. I feel like the ending scene could have been a little different. The film ends with Joker having embraced his personality to the nth degree. He's almost completely abandoned Arthur Fleck as an individual, and he's sitting on the couch. He's on the talk show. He shoots the host, played by Robert De Niro, in a very violent scene in terms of just the way it's shot, the way that De Niro takes the shot and convulses and just sort of slips away, the blood spat. Not the most violent thing in the world, but it's jarring because of how real it looks. It looks very, very real. That scene, the murder scene, the scene in the film that everyone kind of pointed to where Arthur's in the bathroom and sort of doing this sort of thing, and he's got a little bit of blood on his chin. People called that as the scene where he murders the 3 guys. Yeah, that is it, albeit it's slightly different. You think it's all going to be in self-defense. 2 are, to a degree. 1, though, he basically hunts down. He shoots him in the leg so the guy can't run, so the guy tries to make a run for it. He gets off the train, he gets up the stairs, he gets shot in the back again by Arthur, who then walks up to him and shoots him 3 more times. There's no self-preservation there. There's no self-defense there. He's baying for blood at that point. He wants to make this guy suffer, or at least cover his tracks. And the moment where he runs away, he's got his bag in his hand again. That scene is in the trailer. He closes the door. He's panicking. He's frantic, and then he just slips away. He starts doing that dancing, he starts doing all the rhythmic movements and stuff where he becomes effectively Joker. And the scene is all spawned by the fact that he has this uncontrollable laugh, which I've alluded to in the review. And that uncontrollable laugh is again seated in it's childlike panic. It's a nervous tick he has. He can't control it. The scene in the second trailer, as a matter of fact, where he's doing the thing with the kid, and it cuts out a lot of that scene because that scene actually ends with him being dubbed over saying, I'm sorry, and he just kind of leans back into the bus. In the movie, he starts laughing. He can't help it. And the woman's like, what's your problem? And he hands her a card that he hands to other people throughout the course of the film to explain that he has a neurological condition that causes him to uncontrollably laugh, or at least laugh in situations where he doesn't mean to. That laugh becomes so horrible to hear after a while, because it's a genuine affliction that it's torturous, because it invites challenge, it invites provocation, it invites people mocking him. It's a film that made me think a lot about the question that was asked by a couple of the reviewers, and that I'll ask it as well, is, do we have a hand in creating these people? And I think, of course, we do. I think the real question that needs to be asked is, what do you do about the kinds of people that this would be relevant to? I.e., the kind of people that you would reasonably want to walk across the street from. You know, you wouldn't want to... These are people that are genuinely hurt and damaged and fractured as people. You feel uneasy around them, but you can't ignore them. They are part of our society, and there has to be a way of attending to them and dealing with them in a more humane way, rather than just over-medicating them. In fact, in the film, there's a scene where they, again in the trailers showed way too much, by the way. I think that's a fair comment to say. In the trailers, they gave away way too much that helped you piece together the film in a way that kind of detracted from it a little bit. It made it feel shorter and more basic than it actually is. It's a terrific film. Well paced, in fact. But there's scenes like when the thing is closing down, and he's in that moment. What you don't see is that's the moment where he is literally clinging on by his fingertips to sanity. He's how do I get my medication now? What can I do? I don't want to feel these things. I don't want to feel bad anymore. What can I do? But I feel bad. I need you to help me. And they got nothing for him. Got nothing at all for him. And that's why I made mention of the fact that it all feels inevitable in this film, because you see it coming. You see all this stuff. The rich guys on the subway station being dicks and getting murdered. That's a really intense scene where they start mocking him and they start pandering around him and dancing and wearing his wig and taking his stuff and beating him up, and then he pulls the gun that he's been given by a buddy of his that eventually gets him fired. He's banging his head against stuff. It's a hard film, because you have to wrap your head around the fact that there are people like this that genuinely exist. That's why I think people struggle with it, because as much as this is supposed to be a comic book movies are supposed to be about escapism and fantastical people who couldn't exist. They're paragons. They're the basest, most depraved people. They're the greatest of heroes and the worst of villains. This film is about a gentleman that could very well exist. You could see this chain of events unfolding. Maybe not to the certain degree that he is, but it's hard. It really is hard to watch this guy descend into the madness that he does, because all of the scenes like, when he's visited by the guy that's willing to cover his tracks with the short guy, murders him. I felt really bad. Like, I don't think that scene was meant to be funny. I get that there's a bit of humour with the fact that the way the scene unfolds is, one of the clowns that he works alongside gives him a gun. The gun then later gets him in trouble because he brings it to a children's hospital while he's performing to protect himself against another mugging. He drops it, he's immediately fired. But the cops then hear about the fact that there's been 3 subway killings that the gun was used in, and they question him and they question Arthur. He comes to Arthur's apartment after probably 3/4 of the film has unfolded, so Arthur is already on his path to becoming the Joker at this point. He's already killed multiple times to cover his tracks, and Arthur stabs him in the head with some scissors and kills him brutally. And he's accompanied by a short guy who has been nice to Arthur throughout the course of the film, even though that Arthur just genuinely hasn't had the strength of character or the fortitude to defend the short guy against the jibes from the other clowns, which happens a couple of times in the film. Arthur laughs nervously along with the jokes because he can't help himself. So he decides to let the guy leave, and because he's short, he can't reach the latch on the door. And you think at that moment he's going to murder him too. Like, was that intentional? And he gets up and just it's like, oh no, I forgot. No, bad. And he gives him a kiss on the head, says, "You were always nice to me," and lets him leave. Again, the last vestiges of his sanity is shed in that moment. You can tell in that moment that's him feeling like, I've paid you back for a lifetime of this. We're now square. If I see you again, though, and I think it's funny, I'll kill you. That's why I was trying to say in my review that he's not a character you're rooting for in this film. And people who think that this is a film about someone that we should be rooting for are sorely mistaken. They really couldn't be further from the truth there. It's a hard film to digest because this individual could very well exist. These circumstances could have very well happened. And we have to find a way to come to terms with that and understand that truth, because as uncomfortable as racism is, as uncomfortable as sexism and bigotry are, and xenophobia, and the persecution that people have to endure on a daily basis, and mental health issues, and all of these things, the reason why they're hard to deal with and process is because they're true, and facing up to truth is some of the hardest things, because how do you change something that's true? How do you circumnavigate it? How do you avoid arriving to the same conclusion later on down the line if you do decide to effect change? These are all hard questions. And this film attempts to ask that. What do we do? How do we handle someone like this? Because this person exists. Do we ostracize them as we do in the film, which can lead to the overwhelming rage that bursts up as a result? Do we put our arms around them and to some people, like some people fear, do we almost glamorize their plight? I don't think either one of those things are the answer, but I know I'm not smart enough to know what it is. I just know that the film and the scenes of Joaquin Phoenix going through a lot of change in terms of his psyche and the conclusions that he reaches, and the fact that he's a pathological people pleaser at the beginning. He's just dying for someone to give him some kind of adulation, to the point where, again, he's invented an imaginary girlfriend. He imagines himself on the talk show that Robert De Niro hosts. He imagines him. It's an early scene in the film. It's one I alluded to because it's a hard scene to watch, because it starts off, again, innocently enough. He sits down with his brother to watch the show, and then suddenly he imagines himself in the audience, and the audience are clapping along and agreeing to everything that he's saying, and the host is giving him that, and he's saying, "Come down," and he goes, "I wish I had a son like you," and it's all the things that he's desperate and longing to hear, and never will, and he'll never hear it. It's heartbreaking. Again, when he loses his job. And the problem is, it's heartbreaking because you want to see this guy helped. It's also heartbreaking because you know deep down he shouldn't be doing what he's doing. He needs to stop. But he can't. He's down a path, and nothing can stop him at certain points in the movie. The momentum is shifted. People are too concerned with their own interests. They're not concerned about him. It's a world focused in on itself, ignoring what Arthur Fleck becomes. To the point where that ending scene, so the way the film ends is that Arthur is invited onto the talk show. He becomes the Joker. He talks about killing himself throughout the course of the film, and while he reads his book, which is kind of where he's written, "I hope my death makes more sense than my life did," he has a moment where he would have normally mind shooting himself, so you'd imagine he would tell the joke and shoot himself, where he goes, "Nope, I think I'm going to show you why you're wrong." And the visceral reaction that's back is in keeping with the Joker character, which is that the Joker has always operated to show society how dumb he thinks it is, how wrong he thinks it is, and how immoral and unjust he thinks it is, and how it is all a big joke. And that's why I said he embraces his laughter, he embraces his smile, because to him it's for him at that point. He embraces his truth. And that's what's terrifying about him. He truly believes in his heart of hearts that society is broken beyond repair, that he is a product of that society, and that the only reasonable recourse of action is to just murder everybody. And it's horrible. It's terrifying. It's thought-provoking. It causes some soul-searching in how we interact with each other as a society now that we're... I can't speak for every other country, but here in England, it's certainly getting not crazier as the film. It's not like we're not a DEFCON 5 here, but certainly it feels like the goodwill to common man is diminishing, if only a little bit day by day, just in little things like the common respect we used to offer each other, the common courtesy, the idea that when we saw people struggle, we were eager to help them up, not just stand there with a smartphone videoing it. The fact that we're all vying for each other's attention, and yet no one seems to get it. The fact that we all seek that perfect thing that we see on Instagram. But that's not real. It's not something to attain. All of these themes are reflected in the film to some degree. Even in the subtle nods, like for instance, we all are obviously all on our smartphones these days. There's a scene in the movie where everyone's reading the exact same newspaper. I'd looked at that and I went, yeah, things really haven't changed over the last 40 years. As much as we'd like to think our technology has elevated us to beyond where we were originally, things haven't changed that much. Yeah, it's a hard film to watch, as I said in my previous review. I mean, a couple of other scenes that are just worth touching on very, very quickly. He kills his mum because he finds out that his mum is a psychopath who allowed him to be beaten and abused as a child. Smothers her with a pillow in the moment where he recounts the fact that I thought my life was a tragedy, but I realised it's a comedy. But it's actually said with a lot of venom and anger as he does it. The catharsis he feels afterwards is just mirrored by the calmness as he leans across the window. Doesn't even make an attempt to leave the room at that moment. Just kind of settles in. And then the final scenes in the movie where his appearance on the TV show has caused a riot, and which leads to the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne. He is in a police car being led away, and the police are saying, it's not funny, look what you've done. He goes, yeah, I know, it's beautiful. The car gets hit. He's then put on a martyr, which reminded me, so he's being carried out and he's laid out on the front, the bonnet of a cop car. It reminded me of the end of Arkham City, where the Joker's body is placed on the hood of the cop car, albeit to a different degree. Obviously, there he was surrounded by police, and it was a rather odd mourning moment for the death of a character, even though his death does bring an end to a very dark chapter in Gotham's history. This one, he stands up, his face is bleeding, so he uses his mouth to paint the smile on his face, the blood to paint the smile on his face, turns to the adulation of the crowd, and then it cuts to him in a mental institution, where he imagines Thomas and Martha Wayne having been murdered, laughs to himself. The psychiatrist asks him what's so funny, and he says he's just thought of a joke. She asks if he wants to tell it, and he goes, doesn't even say it in a very menacing way, doesn't even look her in the eye, just says, you wouldn't get it. Cut to bloody footprints and him running away. Now, I've just seen a couple of reviews where people are saying that there's double meanings and some of it might have been imagined and maybe it's an interpretation, maybe the whole film happened in his mind and it didn't really happen. Look, I'm not that kind of person. I will take things at face value as much as I can. And in this film, I like to believe that the journey of the Joker is the journey of the Joker. Because, again, the thing that I think that is important to take away from his character at the end of the film is this. As much as people think that he is being glorified, he is not. He is a pitiful, horrible individual. Society played a role in his downfall, there's no doubt about that. But ultimately, the reason why society endures is because of the good and kind will that still exists, albeit it's just not coveted as much as it used to be, and hopefully one day will be again. And the fact is, we can't see his actions as justified. We can certainly sympathise, we can certainly empathise. That's the good thing. That's the thing that tells you that you've got your moral compass set justly. When you look at him and you go, even with everything you've done, I understand to a degree, and I feel sorry for you, and I want to help you. That's the goodness, that's the human element that's worth pointing out. The point that someone goes, yeah, I could totally see myself going down this path and totally see myself reacting this way, that's when you start to have problems, because he does things in this film that are bizarre and odd, and like I say, because of his almost childlike demeanour, his almost relentless beating down by society and by the people around him, the lack of hope, the lack of just general appraisal and approval that he's experienced leads him into these dark scenarios. It's a hard film to watch, people. And I don't want to see a sequel to this because I don't know how this character would fit into a Batman mythos. I don't know how his character, which isn't a criminal, he's not a criminal mastermind. He's not someone that sets out to prove a point. He's self-obsessed and narcissistic. He goes on the show for him because he wants to make his point. And once his point is made, that's his arc done, really. He's achieved what he set out to achieve. He did what he wanted to do. I don't see how converting him into a criminal mastermind or a general menace to the city, a city that idealizes him to a certain degree, given the way the film ends. On a very dark note, by the way, because the city's completely engulfed in riots. I don't want to see a sequel, but it's a hard film to watch. I loved watching it. I don't know if I'll see it again because, it is painful. There are moments where Arthur's character is just subjected to such horrible things and you genuinely feel sorry for him. Yeah, just know that going into this film, it's going to test you. It's going to ask you to question your moral fabric, to watch a lot of the characters that you've grown up knowing in a very real and visceral way. Joaquin Phoenix is going to suck you in and he's not going to let you go until the end credits. The cinematography is absolutely outstanding. That soundtrack, that haunting violin, the two tones, again, the mirror of the Dark Knight, is so perfect. So perfect. It just illustrates the tragedy just beautifully. I guess the question now is, have you seen the film? And if so, what did you think of it? Joker, 2019, Joaquin Phoenix, Todd Phillips. What a film. An outstanding film, an amazing film, and a wonderful film. Just really hard to watch. Really, really hard. But what do you think? Leave me your thoughts in the comment section below. If you've seen the film, let me know what some of your favourite moments of the film are and why they were some of your favourite moments. Let me know about some of your theories about the film if you want to go into that. And check out some of the other content creators in the description below. Follow me on Twitter. I hope you... Again, having seen this film, I genuinely hope that you're taking care of yourself. This film's got me thinking. It's got me thinking about how I treat people, for certain. So, I genuinely hope that you're taking care of yourself. So, you do that, and hopefully, I'll see you on the next episode of The Halcyon Show.